What is happening, everybody? It is Saturday afternoon, and no main slate to talk about on this show. We're going to be talking about the Saturday NFL slate. Neil and I doing a live before lock, breaking down the 2-game Saturday slate. I kind of preferred the 3-game slate we had last week, but still, we got a good one here for this 2-gamer on Saturday. And I'm typically not the biggest fan in the world of 2-game slates, Neil, but just before the show started, I'm running my lineups through the Sims. I'm only playing 20 lineups today on this slate. And I got 2 results that were so far different than what I was expecting that it kind of makes me excited for this slate because I've got wildly contrarian lineups, which we're going to be talking over the course of the show. So if you guys can do it as you come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and shout out to DraftKings Rainmakers who are sponsoring the show today. If you guys haven't checked out Rainmakers yet, I know there's only a couple weeks left in the season, but they do still offer a starters pack. So these are totally free cards that you can win actual cash prizes with. So go check out the link below if you want to get your free starters pack to get you a full set of cards that you can use to build lineups with and win some actual cash prizes. But Neil, what is happening? And we got the holidays upcoming. You got any plans for that?
Yeah, not tonight. Tonight, just hanging out, probably going out with my wife. Tomorrow we are going to my in-laws house, so I might be doing looks like a Sunday Night Football live before lock from the in-laws potentially tomorrow, and then going to my sister's house I think on Christmas. So yeah, we got some fun family time planned for Christmas. We of course watched Elf last night, which I think it was the first time I've actually seen Elf, but really enjoyed that. Yeah, it was a good. I enjoyed it.
So I've got a couple things. First off, I don't understand how you haven't seen it before. But the other thing too is I don't know how you don't know if you've seen the movie or not yet. You're watching like maybe I've seen this, maybe I haven't. I don't really understand the dynamics of that.
Greg, I am blessed with a horrible memory, so I can just rewatch movies and I have no idea what happened. It's great.
Yeah, so that I've got to remember like an elephant. I remember everything. Even to the point where like I could typically tell you like the dates that I've seen individual movies.
Damn.
And stuff
okay.
Like
you
that.
got one of those like photographic, there are people that like remember like literally everything that has ever happened to them, like with perfect detail. Like that, I forget what it's called, but like there's people that like have just like perfect memories of anything that's ever happened and like anything they've ever like heard or read, just like offhand, they remember it. You're like a level of that.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm somewhere on the spectrum. It's not on the whatever the good end is where it's useful. I don't have that. But I can remember like dumb shit. So like my brother and I always talk about UFC cards, and like I could remember every single card I've ever seen. Like I could tell you when it was, where I watched it, what happened in all the fights, who I watched it with, and everything. But like it's not any sort of practical information that I could do anything with that's useful.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I used to have a good memory for like certain really weird things. Maybe I still do to an extent. I remember like weird things that people have told me about themselves, that kind of stuff. But like same thing, like actual useful information that I can use day to day. My memory is not great.
Yeah, and people in the chat saying we got Big Cat 79 saying fuck that. Life about forgetting shit, remembering everything be torture. Dude, tell me about it. I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll be like, oh my God, that awkward hallway interaction I had in middle school. I remember every single awkward hallway interaction I had in middle school, high school. I remember all of them, and they will frequently keep me awake at night. It's just I will constantly replay embarrassing memories in my head, and I don't know how to get rid of them. They just exist forever. And the other thing too, I don't know if you knew this, Neil, but I think the actual human brain can only remember memories of it's up to like 7 or 8 years. And then past that, any memories you have, so like if you have a childhood memory, you don't actually remember the event. You have a memory of the memory. And that's what just constantly happens is you'll recall that memory and then you kind of will remember it from recalling it. That's why often if you'll be talking to a friend, you'll be reliving like childhood stories. Be like, hey, remember when this happened? And you guys could have totally different recollections of the event. It's because you don't actually remember. You're just remembering your memory of it. And that's why you'll have these weird things like you're at a party with somebody in high school and you're talking about it back in the day and you have like totally different recollections of what happened.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Like I don't have vivid memories from very long in the past. And I have heard that before, that you're just remembering your memories of things happening. Yeah, that is pretty interesting. But yeah, the result for me is I don't know if I don't think that I had seen Elf before. It was all very new to me and I enjoyed it very much.
We got Sam Pierce in the chat is saying, Greg, just get some concussions and your memory won't be as sharp. I've had concussions too. I've got a concussion playing tennis. I've got an injury right now. I'm not a concussion. I did break one of my toes a couple of days ago, Neil, which has been a massive pain for me because hard for me to get around. And also I'm just home by myself for like the entire month and looking ahead to next month. And now it's like I can't go out to get food. So just been like door dashing, but not exactly sure I'm going to do the next couple of days with everything closed due to the holidays. So that is going to be a hurdle for me to overcome. But before that, of course, we've got today's 2-game NFL slate. And one thing I want to ask you, Neil, before we get into talking about it, we don't cover very many 2-game slates around here. Are there any kind of differences for you in terms of how you're building your lineups for this 2-game slate versus how you might look at, like a 10 or a 12-game slate?
Yeah, I mean, there's huge differences in a two-gamer versus a slate that size. One of them being I'm willing to play defense against my quarterback, willing to play more players from the same team. So like for a main slate, I might not play more than 3 or 4 players from any given team. On a 2-game slate, I'm willing to play 6 players sometimes from the same team. You can see that win from time to time for 3-gamers. You can get a little bit more different, like players that might not be in play on a 10 or 12 game slate. Suddenly on a 2-gamer, it's like, yeah, maybe I saw people in chat earlier talking about Leonard Fournette. Like, you're not playing Leonard Fournette on a 10 to 12 game slate, even though he was called up from the practice squad. But on a 2-gamer, he might be viable. Maybe that is a shot that you want to take. So honestly, there's a ton of ways that I play differently on a 2-gamer versus a 10 to a full slate. How about you? Any other things that you can think of that are a little bit different here?
Yeah, for sure. Most notably is that I have defenses versus some of my position players. It's fairly unavoidable on a 2-game slate. If you're looking at a full 10-game slate, it's pretty easy to have lineups where you don't have any sort of that negative correlation, but you kind of have to do it to some extent on a 2-game slate, especially if you're playing, like max entering lineups. There's only so many lineup combinations you can come across. And for me, even only playing 20 lineups for today, I still end up with quite a few lineups where I have position players going up against the opposing defense. And another thing, too, that I've noticed by looking at my lineups is they are so much more contrarian than I would normally have my lineups be on a full slate. Now, how I went and built my lineups is I just ran lineups through the contest generator, through the Sims tool. I made a couple of adjustments for things that I liked that I saw fit. And yeah, I ended up with some pretty contrarian stuff. And also, if you guys haven't checked out any of our packages at stochastic.com, we do have a promo going on right now, because if you sign up, and this is because of the holidays, that's why the promo code is holiday meal, you get access to any package on the site for 25% off. Sign up using the link below, check out with the promo code holiday. Anything you guys are interested in, whether it's the lineup generator for NBA or NFL, if you're looking to get access to the Sims tools or anything else, sign up using the promo code holiday and one of the links we have below, and you're going to get yourself 25% off. But let's start here by talking. Well, I was going to say, let's start by talking about the quarterbacks. And I saw right away we got a couple of super chats that came in. One is from Chris Williams, who's gifting out 5 YouTube memberships. And Chris, who I know has been running pretty hot in the DFS streets over the last couple of weeks, thank you very much for supporting the community and the channel by gifting out some of those YouTube memberships. And then we've got Woody Hacker has left us a super chat asking, how much salary are we leaving on the table? And let's see. So of my 20 lineups, the most salary I've left on the table in any of them, Neil, is $1,400.
Yeah, let me looking at my lineups. I'm not on the lineups page right now. Let's see. Yeah, several of them. I do have some, like I'm not forcing it to leave salary, which honestly I think about sometimes, that on a 2-game slate that might be something I should be considering, like actually setting a max limit on these lineups. It's not something I've ever done. Probably a mistake that I don't do that for these 2-gamers. But currently I actually don't have any, and I'm only playing 26 lineups. All of them are 49,000 to 5,000, which honestly is not necessarily something that I would. I have 148.8, I guess. But for the most part, I'm using a good amount of my salary. Who knows? Maybe as I adjust more, I'll get to some lineups that are using lower salary, but it's not something that I am forcing currently.
So this is probably one of the most useful aspects of the Sims tool and the contest generator. Actually, Mike, while you're here, can you go to the contest generator and just build out lineups for DraftKings? And we can look at the lineups that are expected to be duped most frequently. This matters a ton for 2-3 game slates, or if you're looking at something like Showdown, where the dupes, it plays a pretty significant role in how your lineups are expected to perform from an ROI standpoint. And we can look at what some of the lineups are that are expected to be duped the most by building lineups in the contest generator here. So, Mike, after they're done with the contest generator, just sim them through the Sims tool, and then we'll look on the other page and we'll just sort by duped lineups. We can look at some of those. But to me, that's the best way to solve for dupes, because you could have a lineup that leaves all of the that leaves $0 in salary on the table, and it could still be a unique lineup if you're playing like certain really contrarian players in it. But then conversely, you could have a lineup that leaves $300, $400, $500 in salary on the table and could still be duped a bunch of times depending on some of those players who are in the lineup. So definitely that there's like a blanket rule where the more salary leave on the table, the more likely it is to be contrarian and to be unique, but it's not hard and fast. That means it has to be unique or anything like that. So that's how I go about building my lineups, especially for these small slates, is in the contest generator. Then I simulate them. And that's something that's pretty telling in terms of which lineups are expected to be duped. So in terms of how much salary am I leaving on the table, I have lineups in here, Woody, of my 20. I've got a couple of them that are using all of the salary. And then I've got some that leave over $1,000 on the table, but it's not like one individual rule. I kind of let our data do the work for me.
Yeah, same. I typically do too. It's different for me in Showdown. I force, leaving some salary on the table just because it is easily the easiest way to get unique. I don't do that for shorter slates. Again, it is something that maybe I should be doing more of it, but has not become part of my process yet. So for the most part, I'm using close to the full salary cap, which honestly, if you're hand building and you like a lineup where you are leaving significant salary on the table, no issue with that on a 2-game slate. It's probably easier to get to the top if you are leaving a little bit of salary.
All right. And Mike, let me know when those lineups are done being simmed, and then we can throw them up on this. Okay, cool. So sort it by dupes here. Yeah, sort by dupes. The dupes column right there. And if you could blow that up so we could see it, or if not, I could just pull it up on YouTube here. Okay, cool. Because I want to look at some of those lineups that are expected to be duped most often. You guys saw Mike already favorited some of the top expected ROI lineups, and none of those are the lineups that are heavily duped, because even if a lineup projects well, there's a pretty good chance that its expected ROI is quite a bit lower for a 2-game slate that has a bunch of dupes. And you saw in there in the Sims tool, there were a handful of lineups that are expected to be duped a bunch of times, Neil. So it is definitely something to be cognizant of today. But where I am differentiating a lot of my lineups, and if you look here, these are the lineups that are expected to be duped the most. And no surprise here, Josh Allen is in 3 of them. So from the top to bottom, these were all lineups that across the 10,000 we built, they were duped. I think it was around 20 times each. So these are the lineups that are expected to have the most dupes. Jake Browning, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, George Pickens, Tanner Hudson, James Cook, and the Steelers defense in the first one. And then all of the subsequent ones that we see on screen are Josh Allen stacks. And I see another Jake Browning one showing up. So, before we started the show, I was telling you I was building the final version of my lineups, running them through the Sims tool and the contest generator. And my expectation was going to be that I was going to get to a ton of Josh Allen. He projects so much better for us than every other quarterback on the slate. And then what happens? I build my lineups and find out I'm hardly getting any of Josh Allen, I'm getting, this is where my lineups are looking different. I'm getting to a lot of just these shitty garbage quarterbacks. And then you hope a couple of things happen. Number one, maybe one of these quarterbacks goes off in garbage. I'm like, the Bills could absolutely end up just smashing the Chargers, and then maybe they don't have to throw the football that much. And that is something that comes into play in our Sims, where if games are blowouts, the Sims are simulating each game, each slate 40,000 times. And that is one of the range of outcomes that could end up happening here. So I'm getting the contrarian quarterbacks and not really getting myself to a lot of Josh Allen. He's going to be crazy popular today. I think it's one of the easiest ways to differentiate your lineups is just by making stacks who are not Josh Allen. He's projected for north of 50% ownership, Neil. He's only in 3 of my top 20 lineups. What are you going to do with Josh Allen, who is the chalk of the slate?
Yeah, so I actually, when I first ran my first crunch and looked at my top 26 lineups, which is what I'm playing, I was getting to like 30% Josh Allen. I actually just, after bumping up Gabe Davis quite a bit, I'm up to 46% Josh Allen right now, which honestly, I'm totally fine with 46% Josh Allen. Yeah, definitely one of the easiest places to get different if you just want to go to one of those contrarian quarterbacks. He's pretty clearly the best quarterback on the slate. He's in a great matchup. He's also the most expensive and going to be the most owned. So yeah, pretty easy to get different there if you want to. But I am still getting to 46%. So I'm a little bit underweight to the field, but it's not like I'm full fading Josh Allen. Like he is clearly in the nut spot, the nut play in a vacuum if you are not considering ownership there.
Shout out to Moving Minnesota in the YouTube chat. Left the super chat, said that he hand builds teams. And this week he took first in a mass entry tournament with over 150,000 entries solely by listening to us on these shows. So Moving Minnesota, thank you for the shout out. Thank you for the shout out and thank you for the super chat. And then, love to see it. That somebody was able to win some money just basically by listening to the show, taking
That's
some of our
awesome.
advice and hand building lineup there. So moving Minnesota, love to see it. Congrats on the hit. Yeah, so for me, Neil, and I'm not going to argue that Josh Allen is not, he's clearly the best quarterback on the slate, but that's
Yeah.
also why his ownership is so high. And that's then also just once again getting back to the dupes. When I was looking at some of the lineups, it's kind of hard to build some unique Josh Allen lineups. The easiest way to build unique lineups is to go to guys like Easton Stick and Mason Rudolph. Do they suck? Absolutely. But this is a 2-game slate. They're 14 and 9% projected owned at quarterback. So neither of these guys are expected to be all that popular over on DraftKings. And then also, if we look at them on FanDuel, they are expected for, let me refresh the ownership page to make sure I'm looking at the most recent number. They are projected for, here we go. So Easton Stick on FanDuel is projected for 14% ownership and Mason Rudolph projected for 9. So basically the exact same ownership on FanDuel as DraftKings. That's how I'm differentiating my lineups. Quarterback fantasy points, like it's the least correlated to the talent of the player compared to other positions, which is something we talk about a good amount. You know, at wide receiver, the gap in projection between the top wide receivers and the rest of the wide receivers typically isn't the same as the top quarterbacks, like the middling quarterbacks. And we see something like that for today's slate as well, where Josh Allen, right? Like I think we all think that he's quite a bit better than Jake Browning, for instance. But the difference in fantasy point projection between them, Neil, it's 5 fantasy points. Whereas compare a top wide receiver like Stephon Diggs to a replacement level wide receiver, and it's 18 fantasy points for Stephon Diggs, but then you'll get somebody like Khalil Shakur project for 6 fantasy points or George Pickens for 9. So that's what I'm doing. I'm playing these garbage quarterbacks. Which of the bad quarterbacks are you most interested in? And then I'll give my answer afterwards.
Oh man, that is tough. I'm kind of interested. I mean, it's clearly Jake Browning is like the next best on the slate. Like he's been pretty good recently. He's in a decent matchup with Pittsburgh. So I guess probably Jake Browning has to be the answer. Yeah, I guess I'll go with Jake Browning as the pretty clear number 2 here. How about you?
Yeah, so I'm getting the most exposure to Easton Stick. Easton
Ooh.
Stick is the quarterback in half of my lineups today. And I do think that garbage time could play a pretty big role in this. If there is a scenario where the Chargers end up losing by 30 points or something like that to the Buffalo Bills, as dumb as it sounds, like I would like Easton Stick in the second half of that game to potentially pick up some yards and do some damage in garbage time while the Bills would be potentially running the football a little bit. So I do think that the game script kind of does set up well for the Chargers here. They are at home. They're 12-point underdogs. That favors them to be throwing the football the entire game. Whereas Josh Allen, the game script kind of favors them to be running the ball with James Cook in the second half of the game. And I do think there's a pretty strong negative correlation between James Cook and Josh Allen. And between the two of them, I do prefer James Cook to Josh Allen. So I'm getting James Cook in nearly all of my lineups, not to get too far ahead of us at the running back spot. But at quarterback, I'm not getting to a lot of Josh Allen. And I'm not saying that you can't play the two of them together, but my preference is to not play James Cook and Josh Allen together.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. I mean, James Cook has had 42% route participation in week 15. I think I generally agree with you that I prefer to have James Cook in my non-Josh Allen lineups overall. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like if Josh Allen doesn't get there, it's probably because James Cook is scoring like 2 or 3 touchdowns on the ground and just going completely off, and they don't need to throw much. So yeah, I think he makes a lot of sense. And to your point, Easton Stick then does make some sense in those James Cook's lineups because maybe Cook score some touchdowns early. They're playing from behind, just like we saw last week with Easton Stick against the Raiders, where the Raiders got off to a great start and they just had to be throwing it. And Easton Stick actually had a decent fantasy game, even though he didn't look good
Great
from a
fantasy
real life perspective. Yeah. Was it great? How many did you put up?
Yeah, I mean, it was for, a Thursday night football game where they lost by 42 points. He scored over 20 fantasy points.
Damn,
If,
yeah.
if you got
Right.
over 20 fantasy points from Easton Stick today at 5,500, you feel pretty damn good about yourself.
Yeah, we would take that. We would take that all day. Yeah, so you're right. I mean, it is not as good of a matchup as that game was against the Raiders, but at that point, I mean, who are the Bills even running out there? If it is garbage time, maybe they're not even playing their starters anymore. So, yeah, definitely, I can see it with Easton Stick. He was probably 4th in my rankings, so he was not the next one that I was going to go to. Just because I don't really think he's that talented, but as you say, like there's certainly opportunity for garbage time there. It's kind of a cluster, right? After Josh Allen, it's like, I mean, yeah, we have seen it with Browning multiple times now. He's actually looked pretty good this season. He keeps on putting up decent fantasy games. So he's like the pretty clear like next in line as far as who's probably the most talented of these guys. And then Mason Rudolph, like I don't believe in the talent at all, but the matchup is as good as possible against the Bengals. He's also only 4,800. So I think Easton Stick to me is the one that's like, yeah, he's kind of got that price tag between Rudolph and Browning. He's got the worst matchup, I think, of the group against the Bills. I mean, it's a fine matchup, but not a great one. So to me, it doesn't stand out. But then you do make a good point. Like he could just be throwing the entire second half. That might be exactly what they need to do. So it's yeah, it's tough after Josh Allen. I'm gonna have exposure to all four quarterbacks, even though I'm only playing 26 lineups, because you can definitely make a case for all of them.
My order of exposure for quarterbacks, it's Easton Stick 1, Jake Browning 2, Josh Allen 3, Mason Rudolph 4. Even with me trying to be super contrarian here, didn't get to very many lineups with Mason Rudolph. He's only in 2 of my 20 lineups for this slate. Anything else you want to talk about a quarterback? There's only 4 guys, so not that much to talk about here.
No, yeah, I think we've covered it pretty well.
All right, let's see. We've got a super chat here from our Apple friend, Chris Williams. He is asking us, great show like always, guys. Mainly playing Showdown today on DK. Not sure why Buffalo elevated Fournette, except for Johnson looks like he's out. Do you think he sees the field? He's only $200. So currently in our projections, we have Johnson in, and we do not have Fournette projected for anything. We don't have him projected to play today, but that would change. Obviously, if Johnson was to get ruled out, then I do think that Fournette would be not like my favorite play on the slate or anything, but he would be viable at $200. You know, it's a little hard to say this many hours in advance. I wouldn't be playing Leonard Fournette in a classic contest for sure. But for Showdown, Neil, do you think Fournette ends up playing? And if he does, is he somebody you would like at the flat min for Showdown?
Yeah, I think he probably plays some. It's a nut matchup. Like maybe this would be a great opportunity for him if he does get on the field. He'll be in a great spot with the Chargers. Maybe they want to get him going. I mean, he's historically been very good in the playoffs. I don't know if that's particularly meaningful, but maybe they think it is, and they want to give him some reps before the playoffs start. And of course, they're not even guaranteed to make the playoffs, but maybe this is they want to see what they have in Leonard Fournette. So if I had to guess, I think he does get on the field. Nobody really knows. Like we're all just making educated guesses, but the fact that they called him up, yeah, it would make sense that they'd want to see, at least what they have and give him a few opportunities at the very least. So I think he's a totally viable Showdown play at the Stone Min.
Yeah. Agreed, though, you wouldn't play him in a classic contest.
Yeah, I don't think that I would. It would be I like how owned do you think he's gonna be? Like if he's gonna come in at 0.1% owned on a 2-game slate, maybe I'd have to think about it at that point, just because like that would be like, okay, if he is the guy and everybody's playing James Cook. I mean, he's, to be clear, he's not going to be the guy. I want to be rephrase that. But if he's like comes in at the goal line and he could, if he scores 2 goal line touchdowns, because they don't like using James Cook at the goal line, maybe you would regret not playing him. So I don't think that I'm going to go there. If I were 150 maxing and he was projected for like 0.1% ownership, I'd maybe play 4% Leonard Fournette. Like I think that there's a case to be made that like everybody's playing James Cook. They could get off to a huge lead in the first half. Maybe Leonard Fournette is their like second half, just like garbage time running back in this game. Maybe that's why they called him up. They're like, we're just going to crush this team. We'll need somebody to run it. We don't want to do a James Cook. Let's throw Lenny in there. So I'm coming around to like, do I want to play him at all? I don't think I'm playing him in my 26, but I think if I were playing a little bit more, I would think about playing Leonard Fournette. You accept that you're probably getting a 0, but like there is the upside there as the potentially RB2, maybe garbage time guy in a game where garbage time would not be that unexpected. On a 2-gamer, I think he makes some sense.
My lineups were already so dumb and contrarian. I don't need to add
True.
Fournette to the mix. Like I'm playing
point.
these shit quarterbacks. I've got Easton Stick in half my lineups. I don't need Leonard Fournette to be in there as well. Though with that said, I guess there would be some positive correlation because part of the reason for me playing Easton Stick is, hey, he could end up getting there in garbage time. And that would also be where Leonard Fournette could end up seeing the field. But I will not be playing Leonard Fournette today. So let's move on to the running backs now, Neil, where you and I have sung the praises of James Cook, and I'm not playing the chalk at quarterback as much with Josh Allen. I'm way underweight to the field on Josh Allen. I am not the same with James Cook. James Cook is in 90% of my lineups, which means 18 out of 20 here. He's projected for right around 70% ownership. The field's going to be playing him. I am as well. The running back position is pretty terrible today, where we have James Cook, who is played really well as of late. He's a really positive game script. But in general, this is not a guy who we usually think of as like the stud running back on a slate. But compared to the other options, he kind of is that guy. So I'm playing a bunch of James Cook, and I don't really see a way around it.
Yeah, I'm gonna play a ton of James Cook also. I'm probably not like initially I was getting like 95%. I'm trying not to play 95% James Cook. There's definitely ways for it to fail. Maybe they do just get it done through the air. But he is, I would guess he's gonna end up being my highest exposed player. I'm probably gonna try to get down to like 60% James Cook. Like I'm not trying to like fully fade it. I'm just trying to, I don't want to have him in all of my lineups because I do think it is possible for James Cook to fail here. But he's, yeah, clearly in a great spot against the Chargers. They've always been a run funnel defense. He is like they maybe don't want to be having to throw it all game. So yeah, I think James Cook makes a ton of sense here. He's going to be in over 50% of my lineups, almost certainly. Currently, I'm still at 85%. I think I'm going to try to get down a little bit less than 80% of James Cook, but I get why, like, if the field gets to 90%, can't really hold it against him. It's a 2-game slate, and he's in a great matchup here with not a ton of running backs on the slate that I love.
So let's talk about the scenario where James Cook fails. What happens in a scenario where he fails? Is it just he plays poorly? Is it the Bills actually lose on the road and the game script doesn't play, is what the spread indicates? What do you think it looks like if James Cook fails? And is there another player that you think would play well as a leverage option in the scenario where Cook does not go off?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are honestly multiple ways that it could happen. There's obviously always the like he could get injured, like that goes without saying. He could get hurt and fails in that sense. But the more like without an injury, just like they're getting it done through the air. They just 60-yard bombs every time to Steph Diggs, Gabe Davis. They just score them through the air. Don't really need to use James Cook as much. Is certainly a way that it could go. So I think that is one way that he fails, is just like they get it done through the air. It's just the Bills are scoring through the air. I think it's unlikely that they get like shut out. Like I think the Bills are going to put up some points here. But maybe they don't get into the end zone every time. Maybe they just get some field goals and don't score as much as we are expecting. So that would be one way. They just don't score as much. They score through the air, or they could work in Latavius Murray. Maybe Leonard Fournette does have a little bit of a role. So I think players that would benefit from James Cook failing, obviously the receivers, it would be Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, but even the backup running backs. Maybe it's just Latavius Murray scoring at the goal line, or Leonard Fournette scoring at the goal line, are potential players. And of course, Josh Allen could all benefit from James Cook not having a big game.
Got a couple of questions coming to us from the Discord channel. This one is from Solvers Are Lame. He's asking us, in cash, would we rather play Higgins and Knox or Deontay Johnson and Pat Fryermuth? Let's look at some of the ownership there, because I think that is a good way to help guide us. So he is asking us Higgins and Knox. Higgins, by the way, I think is a very, very strong play on the slate today. And then he's asking us Dawson Knox at tight end, who I think is a fairly weak tight end option, Dawson Knox, particularly for cash games. And then the other side of it is Deontay Johnson and Pat Fryermuth. I am going to go with the Johnson and Fryermuth combination. As much as it makes me uncomfortable to be playing 2 pass catchers of Mason Rudolph's in cash games, I do think that is the preferred combo of the two, particularly because I don't think Dawson Knox is the guy at tight end for the Bills anymore. I think it's Kincaid now. And for cash games, you do want to get yourself some more of that target equity. So I'm going to be going with Deontay Johnson and Pat Fryermuth. Neil, if you're building a lineup and you had a 2v2, Higgins and Knox, or Deontay Johnson and Pat Fryermuth, which way would you lean?
I think I'm with you. It's probably the Steelers guys. I agree with you also that I don't love it for cash, but I am with you that would be, of those options, my preference.
And then the other question we have here is from Nick Tokes. He wants to know, what stacks are you getting today? 1-man, 2-man, any run backs? Neil, I'll let you answer this question first, and then I will give my answer. And yeah, I see pretty clearly that there is a trend amongst my lineups. Most of my lineups are the same sort of build.
Let me see. That'd be stack ROI. Wait, exposures, stack exposures. I do have some quarterback +3. Looks like I don't have a ton of quarterback +1 currently. It's usually quarterback +2, quarterback +3 for me.
it is really hard to make single stacks with your QBs on a 2-game slate.
True.
It's just something that's kind of hard to do, because if you're only playing one of the pass catcher slash running back from your team, then what does it mean? Is you're playing like 2 or 3 from another team and not
Right.
that quarterback. So you're just running lineups through the Sims. Like, you're naturally going to get to lineups that are pretty heavily correlated towards one team. So with that in mind, most of my lineups are QB with 3 of his pass catchers, and that could also include a running back being in the mix, and then 1 run back. That's the most commonly used lineup that I have in here, Nick Tokes. I've got some double stacks as well, but most of my lineups, it's like Easton Stick with like Eckler, Palmer, Quentin Johnston, and then like Diggs and or Cook or something as a run back. So that's what most of mine look like.
Yeah, same. I'm not doing a ton of single stacks. You could if you want to say like Stephon Diggs is just going to score 3 touchdowns and nobody else is going to do anything, it's fine to single stack. It just it's not what I'm getting to in general. More often, it's going to be double stacks with your quarterback or triple stacks.
All right. So now let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the running backs, Neil. And once you get past James Cook, you got a group of guys that are together, right? Jalen Warren, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, Najee Harris. These guys are all projected for about 30 to 40% ownership. Of this group of guys behind James Cook, who is the priority for you?
So I really love Jalen Warren here. I think that Jalen Warren is kind of taken over a little bit. And you might remember, Greg, last week we did the Saturday show on a short slate, and we talked about these Steelers running backs. And I in that game I said I preferred Najee Harris. What was the guy? I was like, you can play both, you can play them together, but my preference was Najee Harris at low ownership as the guy in a split backfield who's just not going to get as much. This week it changed. Like last week we saw Jalen Warren played way more of the snap share, 68.5% snap share. They did have only 10 carries for Warren to 12 for Najee Harris, but Jalen Warren also 83% route participation last week, and they have about as good of a matchup as you can possibly want against the Bengals. So to me, Jalen Warren is the next best running back after James Cook. He is going to be a priority for me. I am going to have a ton of James Warren. So he would be the answer for me. Do you see it differently?
I've got 2 guys very similarly owned in my lineups, and they are Jalen Warren and Austin Eckler. Eckler, just correlation piece with all the Easton Stick I'm getting to. And then Jalen Warren, basically for all the same reasons that you had just brought up. I'm fairly surprised that Jalen Warren isn't way more popular than Najee Harris. Because we saw last week, like you said, it wasn't just that Jalen Warren actually finally took on more of the snaps, but also Najee Harris sucked last week. He finished with 12 carries for 33 yards. He also fumbled, if I remember correctly. Not that Jalen Warren had any kind of great game, but at least he scored, 12 fantasy points last week. Harris finished with 2. So I thought, just based on that, Warren playing a lot more, having the better fantasy game, Najee Harris kind of getting phased out and being terrible. I was surprised to see that there isn't that much separating them in terms of ownership, which makes it pretty easy for me to say Jalen Warren is the guy there.
Yep. Yeah. So glad we're on the same page with Jalen Warren. Austin Eckler, I can't decide what to do with Eckler because a few weeks back they came out and said Austin Eckler, like we're going to see what we have in these other running backs, and I think it was Brandon Staley still when they said that. So they have changed the coach, but at the same time, just looking at the splits from last week, it was 16 carries for Isaiah Spiller. Now that was a very strange game script. Obviously, they were down a lot very early. Probably just a garbage time thing for Isaiah Spiller largely, but he was like somewhat involved. I think both Josh Kelly and Isaiah Spiller did get touches in the first quarter, like the first half as well, before the game was out of line. So I do kind of think that Eckler is no longer like the bell cow here for the Chargers. He did see 6 targets last week, 33% route participation. But just looking through the snaps, 24 last week for Eckler, 24 for Spiller, 15 for Josh Kelly. So I'm a little bit scared about Austin Eckler. Now, I do think as a result, he might not get a ton of ownership. It seems low. Like we have what, 34% ownership going to Eckler, which in a vacuum feels low for Eckler on a 2-game slate in a fine matchup with the Bills. But I am scared a little bit about the split there for the Chargers. They really don't have anything to play for at this point. Why do they want to give Austin Eckler a ton of run other than I think Lofty brought up the potential, at least, that maybe like he's been very good to them. Like Eckler has been great for the Chargers. This is a contract year for Eckler, so maybe they want to give him one last opportunity to show that he's still got it. But I suspect he'd be more concerned about getting hurt, and that they are going to continue to split carries. So that is my only, well, that and the fact that he looks a little bit washed currently are my concerns with Eckler. But he's obviously historically very good. Maybe he does, if the game does stay close at all, maybe he does take on a bigger workload. Nothing clear here.
Did you see Austin? Because Austin Eckler does like a fantasy football podcast.
Yeah.
He did one, and I don't really watch very much or really any content, but I see clips of it that show up on my Twitter feed, and I'll click on and watch. So Austin Eckler did have a video where he talked about people calling him washed, and he kind of defended himself on it, and then also was talking about how so many people were saying it to him online that it started to get into his head, and to where he went out and just ran a straight run and reported himself to see like what his actual top speed was. And he said it came out over 20 miles per hour. He's like, okay, I could still do it. But he didn't say he got so many comments about it that he was starting to question himself like, oh, am I really not able to run? Because what happened was there were some videos, like a next gen video recording him warming up for a game on the sideline. And he'd said there was a lot of context missing to it, where it was like his ankles were taped up, he wasn't warmed up yet, and he wasn't going full speed. And everybody's like, oh my God, Austin Eckler only running 13 miles per hour. And he said there was a lot of context missing to that clip that had come out. But he said that he did get so many comments about it that it made him question himself before he ended up going and then actually timing him on his own accord to see what his actual top speed was. Not that that really matters for this slate. I just kind of thought it was an interesting story.
That is super interesting. Yeah, I had not seen that.
To me, though, the reason to get to Austin Eckler, the running backs are terrible today. And Austin Eckler is somebody who we've seen with talent before in the past. There is a change in the coaching staff. It does open the possibility for there to be an unknown where he could get worked in more. So Austin Eckler, getting to him as my third most roster running back. Number 1, James Cook. Number 2 is Jalen Warren. 3 for me is Austin Eckler. Are you taking chances on any of the super low-owned guys like the Latavius Murray, Isaiah Spiller tier of players?
Isaiah Spiller, yes, I do think that I'm going to take some shots on Isaiah Spiller. Latavius Murray, yeah, you could make a case. I do think like a 2-game slate is it's a good opportunity to play those RB2s if you want to. So if you want to play some Latavius Murray, we've got him at 1.5% ownership. He could be the guy who just scores those touchdowns in the red zone instead of Leonard Fournette. I mean, it has been Latavius Murray. Why change things up? I think he's been fine in the role. So at basically 0 ownership, like you only need him to outscore the other running backs on the slate. It's very possible that none of the running backs on the slate are all that great. So you can definitely play some Latavius Murray if you want to. Isaiah Spiller also, they're getting about the same ownership here. 16 carries last week, and this that was probably based on the game script. Would anybody be shocked if the Bills are up 30 at halftime? I would not be shocked. So at that point, maybe it is just Isaiah Spiller getting that run. So I think I'm going to get to at least a little bit of these running backs, which, I'm playing again, 26 lineups. It's going to be maybe a share or two of each of Latavius Murray or Isaiah Spiller. But I think there's a strong case to be made for them having potential opportunities here in this game. And then, of course, Chase Brown. I don't know if you include Chase Brown in that bucket, but he has clearly earned a role here on the Bengals. He's somebody that you can play. He's also getting around 10% ownership, so he's not as off the wall.
Yeah, so I am not really getting different at running back in terms of going to like the Isaiah Spiller or any of those kind of guys. But once again, I've got some different looking lineups. I don't need everything in the lineup to be contrarian. And I do think a lot of my quarterback exposure is what does it for me. So I don't have anything else to add at running back. Do you, Neil?
All right, let me see if I have any other notes. I mean, you kind of know what you're getting with Joe Mixon. He's been ceding some touches to Chase Brown. Doesn't look quite as good, but you can still go there if you want to. To me, Mixon just looks overowned, so I'm not going to have a ton. I think that we've covered all of the running backs I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I think we're good.
All right, so let's go to wide receiver, starting with the super chat that we got from our friend Goody. Goody's asking us, it is a season-long question, Josh Palmer or Deontay Johnson? Neil, if he is trying to figure out who to start in his season-long league, should he be starting Palmer or Johnson today?
I mean, is it full PPR or half PPR, I guess would be my first question. But we have, for full PPR, Deontay Johnson projected like 1.5 better than Josh Palmer. So I think even half PPR, I'd probably still go to Deontay Johnson. Just feels like the safer bet to me. How about you?
Yeah, I'm also going to answer Deontay Johnson just because of the way that my lineups break out. I get to more of Josh Palmer today, even though we have Deontay Johnson projected for more fantasy points. just in terms of that game being one that I'm targeting more with Easton Stick at quarterback. I get some more of Joshua Palmer than Deontay Johnson for that reason. But if it was just like a 1v1 for a season long league, then yeah, I'm going to tell you Deontay Johnson is the guy to be starting Goody. So good luck with what I assume is the semifinals of your matchup for today. As far as the wide receivers go, Neil, I think we should start at the top by looking at Stefon Diggs. He is the most expensive wide receiver on the slate. He's the best wide receiver by a country mile. Personally, I don't have any real stand. I'm almost exactly in line with what the field is doing with Stefon Diggs. But what are you going to be doing with Diggs?
Yeah, I'm going to get to a good amount of Diggs. Let's see. In my latest exposure, I have 69%. I'm totally happy with 69% of Stefon Diggs.
About even with
Pretty
the field
close.
Also. I'm at 60. We've got him projected for, what, 63? So
yeah.
Pretty close to the field.
Yeah, not taking a huge stand on Stefon Diggs. It's obviously a great spot. You can pair him with Josh Allen. You can play him without Josh Allen in your lineup. He is, as you said, the top receiver on the entire slate by quite a large margin in terms of projection, like nearly 5 fantasy points. That is a wide gap there. He's also the most expensive. Obviously, you have to pay the price for Diggs, but I think he's worth it. I'm going to have a good amount.
Yeah, I mean, he's so popular that for me it was kind of hard to get too far different than on the field than it came with Stefon Diggs here, because like I think he's pretty clearly the top wide receiver option. If you have the salary, you're going to be paying up for him there. But I mean, the field's got him in north of 60% of lineup, so it's like unless you're playing him in like 100% of lineups, you're going to be somewhere even with the field on Stefon Diggs. As far as the next tier of wide receivers, Neil, we've got actually it's kind of there's 2 tiers that are kind of on their own: Stefon Diggs and then T. Higgins. There's nobody close to either of these guys in price, and there's nobody within $1,000 of salary between Stefon Diggs or T. Higgins. And just like with Diggs, I've got T. Higgins in 11 out of my 20 lineups, also fairly close to the field. He's projected for 48% ownership, so slightly overweight to the field I am on T. Higgins. But this is another guy where it's like, if you have the available salary to play Diggs, you're playing him. If you have the available salary to play Higgins, you're playing him. There aren't other options in these tiers.
Yeah, I have 45% T. Higgins currently. I hate him so much right now, Greg. In my main league, I played against a guy who played T. Higgins instead of Romeo Doubs, even though Doubs projected better. The guy who knocks me out every year. I outscore him by 400 fantasy points in the regular season every year, and then he beats me in the playoffs every year. This year, it was because T. Higgins, in the fourth quarter, put up 20 fantasy points for him. I hate him so much right now, but I'm still going to play 46% T. Higgins. Like he's, as I said, I think Jake Browning probably the second best quarterback on the slate. It's a nice matchup with Pittsburgh, and he essentially takes on that Jamar Chase role with Jamar Chase out. So yeah, T. Higgins looks pretty great.
Yeah, and we got a question from Jets World in our Discord channel. He wants to know, do we prefer Guyton or Shakir as a last man in on DK? And that is Shakir for me.
Yeah, let me see. Shakir, 68% route participation last week. Guyton, who has a much worse quarterback throwing to him, 44%. Yeah, it's pretty clearly Shakir for me too.
There is a contrarian wide receiver that I like, Neil, from the Chargers. It is Quentin Johnston, who I've tried going after Quentin Johnston many times this year. It has never worked out, but there's only a couple of weeks left in the regular season. This might be the time that Quentin Johnston can finally end up realizing some of his upside. He actually has scored double-digit fantasy points in a few consecutive games. Keenan Allen's out. Mike Williams is out. We've seen a lot of injuries to the Chargers wide receivers, and at least throughout the season, it typically hasn't meant that Quentin Johnston has gotten more run, but I think it's different the last few weeks. We have seen him more involved. The targets have been there, not in like a crazy way, but they exist, which was not the case earlier in the season. This is still a talented wide receiver who was drafted in the first round. He has upside. And if you're the Chargers at this point in the year, Neil, what else are you playing for other than to get a look at some of your young guys? So with that in mind, I think Quentin Johnston is an upside while highly variant, cheap wide receiver to get to with minimal ownership relative to a 2-game slate, right? Ownership in the teens, that's low for a 2-game slate.
I think that is the perfect description of Quentin Johnston. Like, I don't think he's shown all that much this year. He has missed some big plays, but he should have some opportunities here. As you say, they should be wanting to get him the ball a little bit, and they're going to need to be throwing throughout the game. So yeah, I actually only have, I thought I'd be right there with you. I only have 4% currently, in part because of some boosts I've given to other wide receivers that I really like on the slate. But I think that he does make some sense. Like he absolutely, they should be throwing the ball, and he should be somebody that they are trying to see what they have. He was, he was drafted highly. Like he came in with some pedigree, even if he hasn't been great at the NFL level. Maybe he shows it here. So yeah, totally fine. What do we have the ownership at on Quentin Johnston? 13% or so.
Yeah,
I don't
he's in
hate
the
that.
teens.
Yeah, that's the right spot on a two gamer. In the teens, ownership is pretty damn low, so I don't dislike it one bit.
Yeah, so Johnson is the cheap guy that I'm getting to be contrarian with. And then if we look at the mid-range wide receiver, guys grouped together, and most of them right around 30% projected ownership. Tyler Boyd, George Pickens, Josh Palmer, Deontay Johnson, Gabe Davis. Of this like 5,300 to 4,600 range, Neil, who is the priority for you amongst this group of wideouts?
So I think my biggest stand on the slate is going to be Gabe Davis. I am playing just so much Gabe Davis here. The field is not getting to a ton. We have him at 18% ownership. He doesn't project all that well, but this is about as good of a matchup as you can possibly hope for Gabe Davis. The Chargers are bad defensively against receivers. They're particularly bad against receivers who line up right wide right, which is where Gabe Davis lines up. It is the nut matchup for Gabe Davis. So I'm playing a ton. He's still a guy, regardless of the matchup, he's going to be boom bust. But it is such a great spot. And he's not getting a ton of ownership for a two-game slate. So yeah, my biggest stand of the entire slate is going to be I'm going to be well over the field on Gabe Davis. And it obviously could bite me. I accept that when I'm on a two-game slate. Like, yeah, it's if I lose all my money because Gabe Davis puts up a zero, I can accept that. So yeah, I'm playing a ton of Gabe Davis. But I do think like Palmer probably safer than Gabe Davis. Like I don't know that I would necessarily play Gabe Davis in cash. He doesn't project all that well. Palmer is actually cheaper and projects better for us. So you can certainly play Palmer. Man, Quentin Johnson only 4,000. I can see why you love him so much. I did not realize he was that cheap. But yeah, he's in play. Tyler Boyd obviously gets a big bump. Part of the reason I think that Gabe Davis is getting such low ownership is Tyler Boyd actually projects a point and a half better than Gabe Davis, and he's only 4,600 to Gabe Davis 53. So there are a lot of factors that like reasons to not play Gabe Davis that to me just make him a better play for large field GPPs because people aren't going to get there. And he's just got that boom bust kind of play style, and it's a nut matchup for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably playing Gabe Davis for a lot of the same reasons that I'm playing Quentin Johnston. So
Yep.
that's like my low owned guy in that ownership range that I'm getting to. As far as the mid range guys, I'm prioritizing Deontay Johnson and Josh Palmer the most. It's a range. A lot of these guys do project very, very similarly, but Josh Palmer fits into my Charger stacks better than what some of the other wide receivers do. And then as for George Pickens, he or not George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. He's my most frequent run back in Bengals stacks.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to have a good amount of Deontay Johnson also. Currently, my Deontay Johnson is currently my fourth highest exposed player. It's man, I got to apparently I knocked down my James Cook by bumping up some of these others, but Jalen Warren currently my highest exposed player behind, followed by Gabe Davis, Steph Diggs, and then Deontay Johnson is next in line for me. I guess tied with with James Cook at about 58% for me.
We've got James Perkins in the chat asked Mason Rudolph, is he starting? Yes, sir. Why is he starting? Because the Steelers suck and every other quarterback is hurt. Mitch Trubisky is hurt. Kenny Pickett is hurt, although we did find out that Pickett is going to return for next week, week 17. But yeah, Mason Rudolph starting at quarterback. So we've got the Christmas narratives are certainly going to be something that people are going to talk about for no reason, like no correlation at all between what Mason Rudolph's last name is and that we are 2 days away from Christmas. But if he goes out and has the big game today, people are going to say that it's because of the Rudolph narrative.
Imagine fading Rudolph on Christmas. Come on. I guess it's the 23rd, Christmas
How
Eve.
can you do it? My least rostered quarterback on the entire slate.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about at wide receiver?
I feel like we've talked about a lot of wide receivers here. Let me see if there's any. I do like Shakir a little bit. We kind of talked about that a little bit as we were comparing him to Guyton, but he is cheaper, projects pretty well. Like he's out on the field a good amount in also a great matchup. So I think that he is totally in play here. I think that we've talked about most of the best receiver. Pickens I'm getting to a bit also. I think people mostly know what to do with receiver. The biggest stand that I'm taking relative to the field is just Gabe Davis. But yeah, no, I think we're good.
All right, so we'll talk quickly about tight ends, and then we'll follow that up with just any remaining questions you guys have or anything like that. We'll hit on those to close it out here. But first, I want to also shout out another holiday deal that we have going on. If you guys sign up at OddShopper for the first time and use the promo code GIFT, GIFT, all capital letters, you're going to get 33% off OddShopper. And Neil, this has been a tremendously valuable product to me and to a lot of people that use it as well. So we had a guy, Ace Hole, want to very clearly make sure I enunciate that correctly. Ace Hole, who tweeted at me and said that he joined OddsShopper during the Black Friday deal and said that he's up $1,500 from where he started in a short amount of time. And then he followed, he said that you have to be disciplined and trust the tools. But if you stay the course, it's a great product. And he said that he highly recommends it. So I thought that was cool. It's just kind of somebody who, is just a member of the community, somebody who's using our betting tools here and used it. He's made a bunch of money. It's also something that's not overly expensive. We're trying to make sports betting affordable for everybody. So it's something that if you sign up using that link below, you do get 33% off using the promo code GIFT. As is, it's less than $50 a month. And it is a tool that I strongly feel pays for itself. I've also been very profitable at sports betting this year. And it's also simplified my process. I don't have to do a lot of my own research or anything. I can just go to OddsShopper, look at the top bets of the day, tail them, place a bunch of them. I post some of my favorite ones in our Discord channel. Discord also comes with an OddsShopper membership. So check it out if you guys haven't already. It is something that I very highly recommend. And it is a tool that I very strongly believe pays for itself, considering the low cost and how good the projections have been. Tight ends, Neil. Anything that stands out to you at the tight end position? We do not have the best selections, which is fairly normal at tight end.
Yeah, I mean, we do have Irv Smith out, so I guess that is a little bit of a boost to Tanner Hudson. Going to look even a little bit better than he has. But honestly, I'm fairly spread out at tight end. It looks like I have a good amount of Tanner Hudson, Pat Freiermuth, Gerald Everett. I'm not getting earlier when I looked at, I think when Lofty and I looked at it, we were getting to just a ton of Gerald Everett. It has evened out a little bit since Irv Smith got ruled out. Now getting to more of Tanner Hudson, I think, in place of some of those Gerald Everett. But I think you're right. Like nothing stands out. I think we have a lot of pretty decent tight ends. Like we don't have a very clear number one option at tight end. But I'm happy with we have fairly a good number of decent. We've got Gerald Everett, 56% route participation last week. We've got both Knox and Dalton Kincaid for the Bills. Kincaid, 63% route participation last week. Dawson Knox actually up to 47% also, both in play. I'm curious about the Bengals, actually. I want to see what the breakdown was last week. Yeah, last week we had Tanner Hudson up to 40% route participation. I guess Irv Smith was already down at 19, but maybe he bumps up to 50, 60%. And he's a pretty talented tight end, 5 targets last week. So yeah, a lot of pretty good options. As far as my favorite options go, I think I would probably say, well, we have Kincaid is up at 5,000. Probably, I don't know, Freiermuth, Hudson, Everett, Kincaid is probably my order. It's really hard to rank them. They all have different, kind of price point with Kincaid. Do you have a favorite tight end?
Not really. I mean, the one I have the most exposure to is Freiermuth, but that's not exactly some kind of real stamp of approval. He's the guy who came up the most in the Sims for me. I do think he's probably the most under-owned tight end at right around 20% ownership. I think that Kincaid is over-owned, being north of 40% owned on the slate. But I mean, he's hard to totally ignore. The order of exposures for me at tight end, it's Freiermuth 1, Everett 2, Kincaid 3, Tanner Hudson 4.
Yeah, Freiermuth was still 83% route participation last week. I know we talked about it last week on the show, how much he had been playing the week prior, and he was doing it again last week. He didn't really do anything. Three receptions for 16 yards last week, but certainly live to score a touchdown. Generally, I'm going to be at least a lot of the time pairing with my quarterback. I think the tight end. But yeah, it's hard. I not taking any major stands at tight end, to be honest. I think we have a lot of pretty good, not great options.
So let's go ahead and look at some of the final questions that we have either in Discord or in YouTube for the last few minutes here as you guys finalize your lineups. And then we'll call it a Saturday. First question here is from Jets World. He wants to know, are the Bills the cash defense on DK? I tend to say yes. If you could have played just one defense on the slate and you didn't have to worry about anything other than what the expected production is, which is what we're looking at here for cash games, yeah, I think it's pretty clear the Bills defense. Same for you, Neil?
Yeah, I mean they project the best of any defense by 1.5 and they're only 3,500. So yeah, I think they're pretty clearly the cash D.
Also the most popular defense, which I think is a pretty good tiebreaker for cash game purposes if you're in between a couple of spots. The second most popular defense is the Steelers, but I definitely feel better about the Bills defense against Easton Stick. than the Steelers defense against Jake Browning, because I do think that Browning is quite a bit better than Easton Stick. Gang Green is asking us, it makes me nervous to agree with the showdown shaman, go Davis and Warren.
Nice.
All right. He's on the same page as you.
I don't know what it says that he's nervous to agree with me, but happy to have you on board.
I think he's just nervous in general about playing Gabe Davis and Jalen Warren.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
So here's another part of this slate. There is no way to build a lineup where you're like, oh, cool, nailed it. All these guys are great.
Right. It's a tough slate.
We've got it's a 2-game slate. So there's 4 teams playing. The quarterbacks are Josh Allen, who's obviously good. Jake Browning, who has played well that we've seen this year, but he's still Jake Browning. He's a guy who's like in his late 20s and is basically on no run at quarterback until the last few weeks in his career. We've got Easton Stick, a young quarterback who's looked terrible so far to this point in his career. And then Mason Rudolph, who we know is not an NFL caliber quarterback. So there is no way you could construct a lineup unless you were only playing Bills players where you'd be like, oh, cool, this is what I was hoping for. There's uncertainty that's going to be everywhere in these lineups because it's a 2-game slate where the teams mostly suck.
Right. Oh, we got a super chat.
We did, from Malcolm Revamp, wants to know who are the must-haves for cash on DK FanDuel. So let's answer this for him really quick because the slate's about to lock. But I would say Josh Allen at quarterback. I would say James Cook at running back. At wide receiver, I'll also say Jalen Warren is another running back. Wide receiver, Stephon Diggs and T. Higgins.
Yep, I think that those are all spot on. Who do you think is a cash tight end? Do we have maybe Hudson?
I would say probably Kincaid just because he's so much more popular than everybody else. But if you need to save salary, then Tanner Hudson.
Yep. And then on FanDuel, have you looked at FanDuel much?
Yep, I've got lineups built out for FanDuel as well. And it's kind of the same story. Like for tight end, if you can pay up for Kincaid, do it. If not, I would say just Tanner Hudson for cheap. You can make a case for Pat Freiermuth as well. But tight end is probably, I would build your lineup. Tight end would just be the last spot you fill out, and it's whatever salary you've left.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
There's just no real priorities for me there.
Yeah.
And I see Einstein is typing in the Discord channel. So let's see if he's asking us a question that we could answer before the show ends. Any quick final thoughts we have, Neil? Like 30 seconds left before we hit lock.
Go Jalen Warren for my best ball team. My one remaining best ball mania team. Do you have any big players you're cheering for best ball, Greg?
I posted. So I did drafts on DraftKings this year. I have 5 teams left. I'm not sure if I have any players who are like more frequently owned across those lineups than other players, though. I think I have a lot of Jared Goff, like Baker Mayfield and Tyreek Hill.
Okay. Yeah. Hopefully,
I got 3 live, and I'm a lot of Bills. That's why I'm wearing this hat.
Nice. All right. Go Bills.
So Mike is going to be rooting for the Bills, and really quick, Einsteinium is left us a question, although the slate's already locked when the question came in, but he's saying 25% James Cook is my slate over. He's at 70% Diggs and Allen. No, it's very reasonable to think the Bills score their touchdowns through the air. It's not the way I went. I played more James Cook and went lighter on Josh Allen, but it could easily go in the inverse.
Yeah, I have no issue with it. I have more than you of James Cook, but yeah, I love the idea of attacking it through the air.
All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. Thank you very much for watching. If you have not done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Have a great weekend. Monday, we are going to be doing some shows. So Monday, I know it's Christmas, but there's going to be an NBA Live Before Lock with myself and Josh Engelman, and there's going to be an NFL Live Before Lock right after that with Eric Lindquist and Matt Kajeski. And Mike is going to be working on Christmas, producing for us as well. So check those shows out on Christmas, guys. Other than that, have a great weekend. Have a great holiday if you are not watching the show on Monday, and see you back here next week.